everybody. I'm Silva Harapetian. I have spent most of my career in newsrooms across the country, and I find it important for us to have conversations as we all try to navigate through this pandemic and through this health crisis. What we're all facing today, staying at home, having to change our routines in order to survive. We are all challenged in ways that we've never been challenged before. But this pandemic is having a completely different impact. In fact, a life altering impact for those who are already facing a health crisis, pre-existing conditions. And one of those people is Rafee Al-Sair and his wife Arsine Sarkisian. One of the ways I wanted to help with this process is to bring them on as guests and get to know them a little bit and find out how we collectively and as a community can come together to help them. So thank you so much for joining us, Rafee and Arsine. I really appreciate you making time to show up. I know you guys are already managing a lot, so to spend some time with us means a lot. I want to start with Rafee. You are half Armenian and half Chaldean. And there's a reason why I bring this up, because obviously it's going to have an impact on the search that you are pursuing in looking for a bone marrow. I'm hoping that Arsine Sarkisian, who I understand is your wife and an RN, correct?
Yes.
Is going to help educate us through this process. Rafee is fighting leukemia. It is a form of blood cancer, and he is in desperate and dire need of a bone marrow transplant.
He has something called a Philadelphia positive gene mutation. And because of that one thing, that puts him at a higher risk category. That is specifically the reason why it's a necessity for him to get a bone marrow transplant, because without the bone marrow transplant, risk of relapse is likely. I think if I'm not mistaken, 70% was the percentage that they gave us for a risk of relapse. And with the bone marrow transplant, it significantly reduces the odds of a relapse.
Rafee, how are you handling all of this?
I'm actually handling it pretty good. My body's handling it pretty good. The doctor says I'm handling it very good. But, there are those bad days. And those bad days, you feel very weak. Anything you eat, you want to just throw up. Nausea, you feel dizzy, headaches. I get a lot of headaches. I'm having stomach problems right now. And I don't want to get too much into detail, but
the side effects are you're feeling the impact of it, and I'm as difficult as this is on you physically and mentally. I cannot imagine how difficult this is for you mentally, Arsine, having to watch him go through this and also be there physically to manage this.
Yeah, it's
take your time. I know.
Yeah. Not being able to have control over, as a nurse, there's a lot of things that you can do for your patient. You feel like you're helping, you feel like you're making them better. And this is a situation where I felt completely helpless. Like it's all out of my hands. The only thing I could do is all the supportive care, making sure that while he's going through all of this, he's comfortable. While he's, going to these doctor's appointments, to the chemotherapy appointments, that I can take the load off of that, asking the questions and organizing things and making sure that the only thing he has to worry about is the next appointment, getting through the next appointment, getting through that next day. Other than that, I feel completely helpless. And it's a very terrifying thing. It terrorizes your mind, not knowing what is the future going to hold. What is 2 months from now going to look like? What's 6 months from now going to look like? What is the bone marrow transplant going to look like? Are we going to find somebody? Are we not? It's more than the physical stuff. He's both dealing with the physical stuff and the unknowns. For me, it's just what you wake up and life is completely different. Everything that people are going through right now with the COVID-19, a lot of people, I hear them talking about, you go to sleep and you wake up and the whole entire world is different. This is something that we experienced 6 months ago.
You've had a double dosage of that, right? Like you woke up one day and you have this diagnosis, and then all of a sudden a few months later you wake up and you have a pandemic. So it's like a double dose of of this
Yeah.
news, of this situation. Yeah.
And with this pandemic, you're constantly hearing the higher risk population, the higher risk population. Well, the higher risk population is Rafee, because with chemotherapy, it completely suppresses the immune system. At certain times, you have no immune system, especially in preparation for times like a bone marrow transplant. And now even the thought of the bone marrow transplant, as much as we need it, just the whole thought of, well, what's that going to be like? How he's going to be completely immunosuppressed. He has to be hospitalized for 4 to 6 weeks. Am I even going to be allowed to be with him during those 4 to 6 weeks? Is he going to be completely alone?
It's been big to have her and to keep it positive for me. Like, she's helped me so much. She's amazing, and
I can see that.
It's made it a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
So that's for sure.
I mean, I don't think anyone can imagine what you're going through, and to the unknown of an illness to begin with, and then adding all of these other unknowns and to it. I can't even imagine. But obviously, I can see the love and the strength between you two, and together and individually. And it sounds to me like you're leaning on each other more than ever to get through this process. How are you? How are you keeping in touch with family, and how are you tapping into your support system?
FaceTime is a lot. We're doing a lot of FaceTiming. Thank goodness for social media. We have, at least in these times, you have social media platforms that you can reach out and, FaceTime. Technology has been great for that.
It's always good to be able to, in this situation, to be able to FaceTime certain people, especially family. My niece, I love to talk to my niece and my nephew. They're young, but it just puts me in a great mood. And then I have friends that I love to hear from or talk to, that I've grown up with. So it makes it a lot easier. It makes it better with the technology we have, the social media, even what we're doing right now. It's an awesome thing,
Yeah.
And the support that you get, the support not just from
support has been crazy for me, from all friends, family, people I don't know. It's just been, it just lifts me up every time. In a weird way, you might think I'm crazy. The whole leukemia, cancer, blood cancer, whatever you want to call it, it might have been a good thing for me.
Wow.
If I get through and I'm 100% again, because it taught me that the things you think, the stuff you think are important really aren't.
There's been a huge change
And
with him.
I've always been the type to have to be the best, to do the best, to stress over things, to make sure everything is right, and I have to succeed. I've always been that way, and that's pretty much gone. You do whatever you need to do, and you move on. If it works out, it works out. It doesn't, it doesn't. These are things I've learned, I'm learning, and some meditating too, but in my own way.
Which is huge,
I'm not
because
a professional or anything.
Because I'm telling you, I could not, for the life of me,
for me.
For the life of me, I couldn't get him to do that before.
Yeah, I was this guy that just played sports all my life.
That thought that people who meditated were a little bit.
Didn't meditate.
Yes, that was his thing.
Like, oh, that guy is doing that. I gotta do better. Like, it was.
Yeah.
I always strived for the best, and it's like, it stressed me out. Anyways, these are the things that changed for me. A lot of things.
Yeah, from what I think what happens is, particularly in our culture, it is embedded in us to be the best we can be, to elevate and to raise the bar I think it's just, I don't know if it's in our DNA or the way we've been brought up, but I
think it's because of the history.
It's
because of our history of our culture, is that they tried to completely get rid of us. And for us, it was no, we will not back down. We are going to do better. We're going to be better than what you thought we were. We're going to prove ourselves. And I think it's become ingrained in our culture
So
that
it's so
we're just going to survive.
We're talking about this because for people who are listening and watching this that don't know what we're talking about the Armenian genocide and the impact that it has on survivors and the generations that have come after that, is that we just have been ingrained to survive, and not just survive, but in order for us to survive, we had to thrive. We had to level up in ways that most people don't understand. And I don't know if you watched my interview that I released earlier this week or last week. The transgenerational trauma and the transgenerational habits in the DNA that is embedded in us, it is absolutely real, and there are obviously positives and negatives to that. The negatives have to do with trauma and us feeling anxious, and like Rafee's talking about, constantly worrying, and you were talking about constantly worrying about, you know, things on the same level, constantly leveling up, constantly being better, constantly beating yourself up for not being those things that you think that you're supposed to be. But the positive is that we're a very successful and dominant and, you know, impressive culture of people, right? So it has pros and cons, but I love what you said, Rafee, because I can totally relate to wanting to succeed at everything, and then when you don't, or when there's a hiccup, you just have a meltdown because it's out of your control and you couldn't. And to put things in perspective for everybody to just kind of say, breathe, because the reality is, as people say, if you don't have your health and you don't have your life, it doesn't really matter whether you were successful or not. Like if you die in the process, it's completely pointless.
Yeah, what was the point? What was the point of all of that?
Yeah. So thank you for driving that home for me, and I'm sure for our listeners and viewers, because if people don't take anything away from this, is to look at their own perspective and take this as an opportunity to reevaluate their priorities and their perspective on how they see life. So, you know, I mentioned that you're half Armenian and half Chaldean, and I said there was a reason for that. And part of the reason is, from what I have read, and correct me if I'm wrong, Arsina, here, the chances and the likelihood of you finding a match within your ethnic community is higher. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Can you educate us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So genetically, we are closer, anybody, to their own culture. Is it impossible that there might be somebody that isn't half Chaldean, half Armenian? Yes, only because sometimes you just don't know. That's why we don't really want to restrict it to just saying only Armenians, only Chaldeans,
or only in the United States.
Only in the United States.
Anybody in the world listening to this and watching this,
there's a chance it could be anyone, any nationality.
I'm more inclined to say if you are of Armenian, Chaldean, from Iraq or that area, absolutely you should get tested. But if you're not, don't let that prevent you from grabbing a swab and requesting one and getting tested.
Very good. So I want to talk a little bit about life before the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, life before the diagnosis?
You know, it was a daily grind with trying to find pockets of time to decompress with friends, with family. We loved going to Disneyland. This is Max, and that's Minnie. Just things with like going out with our dogs. We would take our dogs by a lake. We would take our dogs walking. We would just have barbecues and just enjoy daily life.
Hanging out with friends.
Have friends over, go to their house. It was great. And then there was work, you know, running, you know, my business or whatever with my brother. But other than that,
what did you do, Rafee? What is work? Tell us a little.
Me and my brother have a plumbing business in Los Angeles.
Arsina, are you a full-time RN?
I am a full-time RN.
And what do you have a specialty or?
I work on the neurology unit. It's a neurotele unit. When this whole COVID-19 happened, the whole hospital kind of became one unit.
Mm-hmm.
And so in
Yeah.
essence, we kept our specialties, but we also just kind of became like a melting pot of units.
Yeah. Are you still working?
So as of last week, I was working up until last week. I was out of work when Rafee got diagnosed. I was out of work for 4 months. I went back to work, and then this whole pandemic happened. And then it was a whole other level of stress that added on, because we would have patients that we would suspect of having it, and then all day you've been in that patient's room, and you're not in we were wearing masks, but we were not in the full protective gear because they were not positive for it. So then you transfer this patient onto another unit, but you've been in there for 6 hours already. And so
Yeah.
I would come home, literally change in my garage, shower in a different shower, just leave all of my stuff in the garage, do laundry separately, and still be in the house wondering, do I have it? Do I not? Every time he would cough, I was like,
Oh my God, I can't even imagine carrying that burden, the burden of thinking and knowing and wondering whether you're bringing something home that to someone who is so incredibly vulnerable to it.
Yeah.
So as of last week, you're not working anymore, right?
I am not. My manager called me last week and told me that the hospital had a meeting, and all the managers alongside the hospital implemented some sort of I guess I could call it a benefit for people that are in situations like mine.
That's amazing that in the midst of all of this, that there are hospitals and organizations that are stepping up to make sure that they take care of their employees who need to take care of family members who are at risk and high risk.
A part of me had this sense of extreme guilt that my coworkers, my work family is over there, and now they have one less person that would be able to float onto the units to help with this situation. And so it's been a lot of...
She cooked for them the other day, by the way.
Oh, that's great. So hey, so you know what, you give back in ways that you can, right? Like,
yeah, you kind of do all that you can. I figured it's one less meal that they had to worry about while they were at work, and so it's,
that's amazing. I got chills. That's amazing to know.
Thank you.
And see how we're all coming together at a time like this is really incredible. And it's the small gestures that are made. It's a big gesture, but it's a small act through the hospital, and a small act of you cooking for your coworkers on their small gestures, but makes such a huge impact. I'm hoping that this also conversation inspires someone to order a swab and see if they can be a match, not just for you, but to just do their part in staying home and making an impact. That one small gesture could mean saving a life. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Of course.
What have you learned individually and collectively as a couple through this process?
To be strong, for sure. As far as
life is going to bring you to your knees, and when life brings you to your knees, there's this strength that whether you find it in yourself, or you have somebody there to lift you up off of your knees. There have been times where he's been strong. He's the one that's been strong, and he's the one that's been comforting me, because I just everything feels like it's collapsing. Everybody knows that the situation that's going on with him, but it's very difficult to see the light at the end of this really long, dark tunnel. And then you just sometimes need a reminder, and you find people people surprise you. So you'll find people that you never knew would just jump in and step up and just go that extra mile. And what I've learned is that there's always something good that's going to come out of something so bad. We found our way back to friends that we hadn't spoken to in so long, because life got in the way, and it wasn't anything that was that bad that had happened. It's just life had gotten in the way, and now these are some of the fundamental people, the instrumental people in our lives right now that are helping us get through all the things that are going on. And so there's silver lining. I think that's what it's taught us. There's a silver lining.
It teaches a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And, when I don't have the patience, she comes, talks to me and gives me the patience, gives me the, the courage, and, helps me to understand, what we're trying to do here. And then I do the same to her, for her.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's helped big time. I mean, we've always been a patient couple, but this is like another level now. It's
yeah.
It's
what are you finding comfort in? Where do you find, is it faith? Is it self-care? Is it each other? What are you finding comfort in?
Each other for sure.
Yeah. Each other for sure, and then all of the above.
And we do things. We try to come up with stuff,
What have you learned about yourself? When there's moments when the other person isn't, because we have the collective experience and the individual experience. There's moments where it's quiet and it's just you with yourself.
For me, the initial response, it's that cliche, like, you're stronger than you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, there's like a deeper thing that I've realized is that the don't sweat the small stuff. I know about me is that I worry about everything all the time. Everyone, everything. I worried about it, and it's just weighs heavily on me. And I have learned that I will self-implode if I let that happen. And so I'm very careful with what I put my energy into and where I direct all of my energy into. And right now it's priorities. You learn to prioritize, and this is priority, and family is priority, health is priority, and everything else has just become secondary. Everything else was always on the same level. Everything was important all the time. And now there's an actual prioritization that's happened.
Wow, that's really incredible. What about you, Rafee?
I pretty much, from the beginning and going on, learned that the stuff I was stressing over in the past wasn't even worth it. And I have a friend that would always try to explain that to me. And he knows who he is. And I never really got it. But after, going through what I'm going through, or what I was diagnosed with, leukemia, it woke me up, and it gave me a different outlook on life and how to look at it.
I'm so thrilled that you have gotten something positive out of something so challenging.
Yep.
It's, the only way to get through situations like this is to focus your attention on the positive. We talk about this a lot. Why did this happen? Why did something happen? And I hate to say everything happens for a reason, because a lot of the times it's really hard to know what that reason is, or to actually think that there is anything good that could come out of these horrific things that happen. But it's the only way to get through them. And if you focus on the negative and self-pity, what's the point of even moving forward? And so there has been a lot that has come out of it. I do think that once he gets through this, because I will make sure he gets through this. Once he gets through this, his life is going to be better for it. His life is going to be more fruitful and colorful, and I think he's going to have a lot more joy that he's going to be aware of. It's joys that he's always had, but I think the sense of awareness that they're present in your life is different once it's almost stripped completely away from you. And it's the same for me. I have a bigger appreciation for my marriage, for my husband, for the person that's standing next to me, and you appreciate even the days that were rough, the rough days in every single relationship, marriage, or friendship, or whatever it is that you have with anybody. Once the thought of not being able to have that stupid argument that you had is taken away from you, you appreciate even having the ability to have those days with that person.
Yeah.
And so then you just kind of feel like, well, there are no real bad days, because they're days that you have with this person. And so it brings you a lot of awareness when you go through something like this.
Yeah. I understand that you guys had been holding drives, bone marrow drives, physically sort of encouraging people to come out and get tested before the pandemic hit. And
Right.
with the pandemic now causing stay home orders, it has significantly impacted the drive and your search for a bone marrow donor, correct? So, talk to me about the impact of that. Talk to me about the news of that, because already as is.
We still have the donor drive through dkms.org.
DKMS is an international not-for-profit bone marrow donor center.
For those of you who are watching and listening, they are holding virtual drives on a website called DKMS, and I'm going to make sure that we have all of these websites up so people can actually go and check it out and learn more about it. So let's talk a little bit about the virtual drive means what? You're essentially looking for a bone marrow donor,
Right.
and you need to find a match. So what does that process look like for anyone who wants to be part of it, wants to help, wants to figure out if they can help you? And by the way, for those of you who are, this is not an optional thing. This is a life-saving measure for you, right?
It's not
Yeah.
just for me though. I want to make it clear that if you do the test and you don't match for me, you might match for somebody else, and you might save somebody else's life. You actually most likely will save somebody else's life. So
And we're going to talk about that, but I don't want to brush over the fact that this is absolutely a life-saving measure for you individually.
For sure.
Correct.
I mean,
yes,
yes, you go into the database and you can eventually help someone else, which is something that any human wants to feel like that they're doing. But for you, this is down to the wire. This is dire need. This is a life-saving
Yes.
measure for you. Talk to me a little bit about that.
9 times out of 10, any of the questions that we get is regarding, well, what is the process and how does that work and what is it that they're going to do to the donor, what the donor needs to do.
Mhm.
The testing is the simplest part of it. It's a swab. Literally, it looks like a Q-tip. You just swab the inside of your cheek, and that gets sent out. And they check what's called an HLA typing. They check specific markers to see if it initially matches with Rafee. The actual process of donating in Rafee's case, it's going to basically be like a blood donation. So they put in an IV, they take the blood out. Basically, they spin it, take the stem cells, give your blood back to you, and they take those stem cells and they transfer it to Rafee. And so specifically what I'm trying to say is people keep asking, is it surgery? Am I going to have to get it drilled into my bone? And for Rafee's situation, no.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because when
yeah.
people hear about bone marrow donation, they think of very big needles, right? That's
Yeah.
the preconception of what
Right.
what you're saying is that this process is incredibly simple, and it's not intrusive at all. So
pain-free, easy,
Yeah.
just like donating blood.
It's so massively important to just do the right thing. And when it's so easy and, it's something that you can do that could change somebody, not just his life, everybody that surrounds him, his mom, his sister, his brother, niece, nephew, my family, myself. It just, one person's life that gets affected, it has a domino effect on everybody else that loves and cares for him.
absolutely.
And, it's something that they could just do. Just do the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sitting with me for about, what has it been, about 45 minutes, and having a conversation and sharing a little bit of yourself and your life, and opening up in a way that is so incredibly impressive and vulnerable. Your strength and your drive and your positivity is really inspiring, and I wish you the best and speedy recovery. For those who want to know how to help Rafee or other people who are suffering from same type of ailment, you can go to dkms.org. I'm actually going to put all of this information on my website on the resource page, so you can go check it out. And honestly, send them a note. Let them know that you saw it. Give them an encouragement. As you just heard, knowing that there's people out there and there's a support system out there helps. And this is a perfect reminder for us to actually connect with people in general, and not just with them, but connect with frontline workers, connect with people that you know in your Rolodex and in your circle, to keep in touch and find ways to contribute. A small act can have a humongous impact. It can, in cases like this one, have a life-changing impact. So this is an opportunity to step up. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.